5 hosts, 4 divisions, all battling it out for the Holy GrAHL of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy GrAHL Podcast. Here are your hosts, Zack Power, Andrew Rinaldi, Corey Swartz, and Dina Weinheimer.
Welcome to episode 65 of Field Pass Hockey's The Holy GrAHL.
Now, this is the episode for April 25th, and we're here to give you a recap of the latest news and around the American Hockey League, and more specifically, round one of the Calder Cup Playoffs, and as we turn the corner and turn into round number 2. First, I'll go around the room and we'll introduce ourselves, and we'll start off with you, Corey. Any surprises from round one?
I'm still reeling in shock from the Hartford-Springfield series, man. If you read my preview that I had on Field Pass Hockey, I pretty much leaned a little bit more towards Springfield to win this series, reading between the lines a little bit there. So I'm still reeling from Hartford outscoring them like 13-2 still. Like, it was unfathomable to me. I thought it was going to be a 3-game overtime winner, and it was as far from that as it possibly could be.
And I'm Andrew Rinaldi. I am very shocked at the Laval Rocket. I expected them to put up a better fight against I wouldn't say a vulnerable Utica squad, but I not one that I thought was going to take them to the house there. And the Laval kind of they ran out of fuel before they even got off the launch pad. So I was really shocked to see that from the Rocket. I was expecting at least a couple more goals, like 1 and 2 games, just not going to get it done.
For sure. And that was kind of my big surprise as well. And I'll tell you a little bit about that more when we preview the North Division. But I also want to throw in an audible mention out to Coachella Valley and Tucson in that series. And that series was a lot closer than what many would have expected, which kind of might raise some questions for round number 2, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But we have lots to get to, folks, including a very special guest who's going to join us. But first, we'll go into our weekly news recap, and Andrew will tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, kind of picking off where we left off from last week with a lot of news surrounding the coaches around the league. And Minnesota Wild general manager Bill Guerin today here on Sunday announced that the team will not renew the contracts of Iowa Wild head coach Tim Army and assistant coaches Nate DiCasmirro and Nolan Yonkman. Now, this announcement comes on the heels of Iowa's loss to the Rockford IceHogs there in the first round of the Calder Cup Playoffs, where they were swept at the hands of Rockford in 2 straight overtime games. It's just the puck didn't bounce your way in that one. It's tough, but Army had 157, 115, and 45 records since taking over the Iowa bench back there in 2018, 2019. So big gap for the Wild organization to fill up. I mean, we've talking before with guys who'd played on Army's team in Iowa. I'm looking at Sam Anas and Will Bitton and they couldn't say enough nice things about them. And you could just look at what the Minnesota Wild are doing in the playoffs. A lot of those players came through on Army's watch. So it's a pretty big loss, I think, here, but organization wants to go in a different direction, and Iowa now joins San Diego, Grand Rapids, and Henderson as AHL franchises in need of a new bench boss. So going to be a big summer for all those teams coming up here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. And I didn't really put Iowa in that sort of tier category of, hey, let's kick out the coach, but I'm sure you'll talk more about their series and whatnot as we approach the Central Division. But we want to start with the Atlantic Division. It was a heated division, and Andrew, you're going to introduce a guest here to tell us more about that.
And for the second week in a row here on the Holy GrAHL, we have another expert coming to us to join in some playoff talk. Now, our guest this week is a writer and a photographer over there at Flyers Nitty Gritty. And she also co-hosts her AHL podcast, the AHL Beauties, on the Old Sports Network. Oh, she is a beauty herself. We are very privileged to have Sam Wismer join us on the podcast here this week. Sam, how you doing?
I'm a little rough today, but it's okay.
There was a lot of words spoken in that. Do you want to talk about it, or?
Well,
That's going to set the tone for the rest of this one here. So you know what? Let's just go right ahead and jump right in. So, Lehigh Valley opened up against the Charlotte Checkers, and, they took game 1 over there from Charlotte, but they, dropped game 2, and they kind of laid an egg there in game 3. Sam, what went right for the Phantoms this playoff, and really what went wrong that led to their early exit here?
What went right this year to even get them there was just the depth that they had. They had a lot of veteran pieces. And then they had a lot of kids that came in, like Tyson Forster, Elliot Denoyer, Emil Andre just came in and hot, like hot off the plane from Sweden. And then you have Bobby Brink, who came back from injury. You had all these kids that came in, and what went wrong? They easily could have won game 3. Easily. I don't like ripping my head coach, but I'm going to put partial blame on Ian LaPerriere. 100%. He should not have started Sam Emerson. But it was kind of a situation, well, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. Nolan Mayer was the backup. Nolan Mayer is a perfectly good goaltender. He is probably going to be in the Saskatoon Blades Hall of Fame one day for his record there. But besides the point, you can't start a goaltender who has started 6 games in 10 days. And then he played a double OT game, nearly 99 minutes of hockey the night before. Less than 24 hours that game ended. And then he was back in net. I'm going to put the blame somewhat on Lappy because he should have known better.
And Sam, I guess you kind of segued into my question there a little bit about Sam Emerson. How would you rate his performance as a whole this season, as well as the postseason? Because, I mean, you saw him kind of get thrust into the spotlight, kind of more so than usual because of, the absence of, Ivan Fedotov as, one big story from over the summer, but as well as Troy Grosnick kind of missed out on a whole season of him. How would you rate Sam Emerson? Obviously, he was regarded favorably in Philadelphia. How would you rate his whole first season?
Well, the whole thing with Ivan Fedotov and that's a sad situation, and I hope one day we will see him, but I'm not holding my breath. And then I hope Troy gets better, but Troy kind of pulled a last season Sam Emerson on us. And kind of dipped out, but he did have some pretty serious injuries this season, so he unfortunately had to shut down. Rating Sam's performance, everyone, they're talking about trading Carter Hart. You're hearing trade Carter Hart, trade Carter Hart, trade Carter Hart. I don't think that's the wisest decision because I don't want to put a goaltender who's only had 10 to 15 games of NHL experience as the 1A.
I am passionate on that subject myself.
Keep Carter Hart and get him a veteran goaltender.
It's not difficult.
For Christ's sake, you can literally go talk to Florida right now. You have a veteran goaltender holding it in net. Go get him back.
I know you just want to see Alex back in Philly. I know we know your end game there, Sam.
Sorry, but I have a point. It's go get what you know and bring it back. But besides the point, in the AHL, Sam's performance. Did he win us games? Yes. Was he left out to dry a lot of the time? Yes, because our defense was not strong. Corey, you saw it how many times this season where the defense just was nowhere to be found. He was very hot and cold.
Well, let me ask you this. Was that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for game 3?
You mean in game 3?
Yeah.
Game 3, I think he ran out of gas because he played 99 minutes the night prior. Lappy should have started Nolan Mayer, or at least started Nolan Mayer in some of those games in the last 10 days so that you wouldn't have burnt out your 1A goalie.
And going back, it was kind of interesting. I hadn't really considered it as much. Do you think it's a reflection on, it's hard. Obviously, it's hard to want to say this about your coaching staff. Do you anticipate any changes made in that regard based on kind of how that happened? I know with Ian LePerriere, obviously, he's a well-regarded former Flyer. This is a guy who threw his face in front of a puck back in the 2010 playoff run, of course. But, he kind of went from the defensive coach in Philadelphia now to Lehigh Valley. Do you think the seat would be warm for him or for his goaltending coach, or do you think they give it another round here since they did make the playoffs and it was a markedly improved season from a year ago for sure?
I can say that Danny Briere has been in Lehigh Valley a lot this season. I've actually gotten to know Danny B on just like passing level, and he was actually in Reading last night watching Reading Royals and Maine Mariners, so I don't know how torn he felt last night because he's still the GM of Maine. I think there's going to be some changes. Do I think Lappy is still going to be around? Maybe.
And obviously it's still very early, so we're just kind of spitballing here at this point too. But my other question was, who do you see? I know that since the Flyers are in a rebuild situation right now, just the way the talk is, it doesn't seem like they're going to be full bore, maybe contending to make the playoffs, maybe to try and make it, of course. It's always the goal in Philadelphia. But who of the young players do you think are probably, on their radar to start or have a crack at the NHL come the fall?
Like straight out of training camp? Straight out of training camp, I 100% believe Tyson Forster is not going to see the lights of the AHL again. 100%. That kid is not going to see it. Maybe Elliot Denoyer. I think Elliot needs a little bit time more to cook, kind of like a Cam York situation where Cam York came back for, 2 months, and then he's never going to see the lights of the AHL again. Possibly Emile Andre. I wouldn't pencil him in quite yet. We got to see what moves are made to even guess that, but these are just wild predictions. Bobby Brink, I do not think is going to see opening roster. I think Bobby Brink is going to be in Lehigh because he came in hot and then he hit a wall, a real hard wall. And from what I see, he holds the stick way too tight and he's just not confident in passing.
Gotcha. And, obviously to balance that crop of rookies was a really strong veteran group. I would argue that Artem Anisimov is probably one of the biggest cogs to the Lehigh Valley system in terms of, scoring goals and, hopefully mentoring some of these young kids along with, guys like Cooper Marody and Garrett Wilson were obviously names that you couldn't help but see on a score sheet a lot of times. Who do you think, that the Flyers are able to keep to maintain that role? I know Anisimov is kind of trying to vie to get back to Philadelphia at some point. Who do you think hangs in there, and who do you think, maybe walks in free agency possibly? And obviously, again, we're still really early, but, just wild takes at this point.
I apologize for my dogs in the background. I want to think that Artie is going to stick around. I really liked Artem. He was fantastic with the group, and he really upheld his role as a vet. And it was nice to see him play at that level. We kind of got spoiled with our vets this year. And then you have Adam Brooks, who was the only Calder Cup winner, who has there's my Marley's boy, who has a Calder Cup under him from 5 years ago. And then you also have Garrett Wilson, our PIM king. And who else? Cal O'Reilly. I don't see Cal coming back. I could be wrong, but he didn't really do all that much. He provided a great veteran presence, but he didn't really do all that much in terms of producing. I do see Garrett Wilson coming back, possibly, maybe. And if he does come back and Cal doesn't come back, I do see him jumping into the captain role, which Captain Wilson, let's go.
That's
And then
good for him.
I know Pat Nagel was flipped back and forth. Let me correct myself before Andrew does. U.S. Olympian Pat Nagel.
Thank you very much.
He was flipped back and forth a lot this season, so I could possibly see him coming back. I don't know. You don't know until all of these moves are made.
I guess going along with that a little bit, set the stage here. Where do you anticipate the first moves, really, the first dominoes to start falling? Would the draft probably be the most logical place to start and wait for Lehigh Valley related news over the summer?
100%. The draft is where everything's going to start trickling out.
It's also kind of interesting to wonder, the Flyers are anticipated to, pick strongly, but, there's a chance of going up and there's a chance of staying, down in the, early, but still, further down than they like. I wonder if that prospect could end up being a Lehigh Valley Phantom to start off before making the jump over to Philadelphia, depending on who they get. Now, obviously, it's a deep draft, and I am far from an expert on this year's draft. I will tell you that much. But I'm curious to see if that's going to be a storyline for them next season. Is that they're, holding more Flyers of the future in an early sense down there too. It's hard to see right now, though. Obviously, very early.
Yeah. I know everybody wants Connor Bedard, but Connor Bedard is going to Anaheim, 100%. Nobody's getting Connor Bedard but Anaheim or Chicago. And, that kid's probably going to start in the NHL, and he's going to be another Shane Wright. Who, by the way, got a goal, and Coachella's winning the game, I think. I don't know.
They
were
up big, and it didn't look like there was a chance for a comeback. It looked like
it's done. Yeah, it is done.
They're dead. It's okay, guys. They're dead. There's a lot of good kids that are going to be in the first round. You've got Will Smith. You've got Michkov coming in. You got a lot of talent in this year's draft. Anywhere you draw, even through the 7th round, you're not going to get a bad pick. Obviously, I'm a goalie person. Flyers need to draft a goaltender badly. We do not have any in the pipeline except Alexei Kolosov, and who knows if Kolosov's even going to come over. But after Kolosov, we have nobody.
Danny Briere is going to have a busy summer, I believe. Go ahead, Zach. I'm sorry.
No, for sure. And I wanted to get back to the series because kind of what's my big question, at least maybe both you guys can probably answer this, but we talked so much about what Lehigh Valley has done. I want to say wrong in the series, right? And I know we kind of eulogized them for the off season to come, but what went right for Charlotte, and what will be those takeaways that they'll move on for the next round?
What went right with Charlotte? Riley Nash. They just had a lot of depth on their team this year. And for what they went through, they battled hard to get that spot, and they battled really hard to get home ice advantage. And what people don't really understand, and I don't think they really understood, the Atlantic Division was extremely tight this season. You were either separated by 1 point or you were separated by 3 points. There was no huge 10-point gap. And I think that was in all the divisions, if I'm not correct. Every division was super tight this season. But Charlotte was one that battled really hard this season. I got to give it to them. They're a good team. And, they went through the loss of losing Alex Lyon halfway through the season to Florida. And then you have JF Berube and Matt Guzda in net. And Guzda is a great goaltender. He does definitely need some time down there. But JF Berube, he's used to be a Phantom. He was really good. A lot of the things that this team battled, they fought through, and they were the better team. I'm going to flat out say it. They were the better team.
For sure. Switching over to that other first round series, Hartford and Springfield, I thought was going to be way closer than it was. The Wolfpack dummy the Thunderbirds there in the 2 games they played. It was a 13-2 total score. And anything, it kind of even looked more lopsided than the scores indicated. I mean, Hartford just never gave them anything. Sam, did you see this coming?
You know what? Hartford added the right pieces at the right time, and they got hot and just took off with it. So, did I see it coming in the beginning of the season? No, I thought Hartford was absolutely going to bomb. But Springfield is springy, and Springy does what Springy wants.
Yeah, I mean, that Springfield team, they were at full strength. There was no real call-ups. We were with St. Louis out of the playoffs. And with a few names back from last year's team, I thought they were going to be making a run at the East, but they don't even sniff it, really. I mean, Corey, what went wrong with the T-Birds?
Well, I mean, easily everything, honestly, went pretty wrong for them. I mean, the only thing, I know it doesn't reflect in the score, but I really do think Joel Hofer gave them a very much a fighting chance as much as they could have in that series. I mean, a lot of the goals against were perfect passing plays, perfect shots, blown assignments. You know, it looked like an AHL team versus an ECHL team, if that, and that was just a favorable comparison in some ways. I mean, you know, it was all the bad habits that Springfield had this season kind of like together in 2 games. And in this series, 2 games is all it takes. You know, they went down early by multiple goals, and, you know, give them a lot of credit in the regular season. They, you know, did a good job of coming back from a lot of those games, but it was exactly what you saw is exactly what they gave up. It was they kind of got comfortable, I hate to say, with going down, and, you know, they couldn't battle back, and you just, you know, I don't know if they believe their own hype or something too hard, you know, that they're the defending champs and, you know, they could fall in the toilet and come out with a new set of clothes on, as my grandfather always used to say. But, you know, they tried, and, you know, ultimately they left their best game in the regular season. I mean, it's crazy too, because they had Hartford's number in the regular season too. Joel Hofer had posted 3 shutouts and 3 starts against Hartford going into this series. And as soon as they cracked him early for the 1 goal, I was saying to myself, like, you know, got to watch out here, guys. So, you know, they just never got their ball rolling and got bounced as a result. So it was just not close.
So Hartford's set to go against Providence, obviously, and that's kind of setting the stage up for a little bit later on in the week. Maybe one or both of you guys can answer this. Does Hartford have enough in the tank to kind of keep that momentum to go forward? I know we kind of mentioned about those pieces, but are they enough to kind of keep them going?
No, I don't think they have enough power to get past Providence. Nobody can get past Providence or Corey's beloved Hershey. It's
a big factor on that Providence team is Brandon Bussey, and I'm sure you guys have seen him multiple times throughout the year. Kind of give us the Coles notes on what to expect from him.
Well, he's up in Boston right now. He's their 3rd goalie. Yeah. So Bussey, yeah.
Ooh, man. They got a 2-headed monster there with him and Kyle Kaiser, though. I mean, it's a 1A and 1B between those 2 guys. So, I mean, if you lose one, if I'm Providence personally, I'm not as concerned as I would be if I were Hartford. You know, losing Louis Domingue was your definitive number 1 guy. And it's no slight to Dylan Garand. I just don't know that he's there yet necessarily. But, you know, I mean, he's the guy now, and, you know, you give him a lot of credit. He delivered where he needed to in that Springfield game. You know, was very much solid enough. For me, if I'm Hartford, you know, they have the offensive talent, but I think that Providence is going to represent their first real test in that, you know, Providence is so strong defensively as well as offensively. They're so balanced, right? Like, you know, they can hold out an offense, and, you know, let's just be honest, your Hartford got to run roughshod over Springfield, but a lot of it was just, you know, 1 or 2 lines, you know, Lori Pajuniemi, Tanner Fritz, you know, Ty Emberson from the blue line. You know, a lot of those guys chipped in multiple points, had big games, but it was really those guys that did the majority of the damage. They got a few goals from, I believe, Blake Hillman, who hadn't scored a goal in the AHL in like almost 4 or 5 years. Like, you know, it was some of their offense came in some really unusual places there. So, you know, against a strong team like Providence, you just wonder if that's going to be enough. I mean, I think that you'll really notice the loss of Johnny Brodzinski in this series, possibly, if they don't get him back anytime soon. You know, obviously Domingue is the other X factor for me. So I like Hartford's chances to at least push this to 4 or 5 games, but you just wonder if it's going to be enough in the tank. Particularly, although Hartford had some success against Providence in the regular season. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but, they were very close games. All those Upper Atlantic teams played really close games with each other over the course of the season. So I do like that as a Hartford fan going into it. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit of a chip on my shoulder from, having that experience of dummying Springfield and then kind of going into an idle Providence team saying, let's just bring it to these guys, So I'm curious to see how that may factor in opening up, certainly.
For sure. But I don't think that they have enough power to get past Providence. We got past Providence in November when we were there for a regular season game. Yeah, but I think that had a lot of factors to do with we had somebody sent down and he needed major minutes because he wasn't getting major minutes in the parent club. And I think that had a lot to do with it. If you know who I'm talking about, Corey, the love of my life, Tanner Lazinski.
I remember that set of games because it was so big for the Phantoms to get those reinforcements when they did, and they took advantage of it too. It was a really good set of games.
Yeah, it was excellent. But I don't think they have enough power to get past Providence. Nobody can, unless you're Garrett Wilson and you just want to pound somebody into the ice and just make them bleed all over the place. I gotta talk about that. Mark McLaughlin, that was his first AHL fight, and he chose to dance with Garrett Wilson.
I think it's biting off a little more than you can chew.
It's bold strategy, Cotton.
If I was Mark McLaughlin, I would have chosen somebody else other than Garrett Wilson. Like, I remember there was a preseason game at Hershey. It was obviously Hershey versus Lehigh. It was like a real early in the season game. And Zaid Wisdom and Cale Kessie were about to go at it. And Cal O'Reilly skated up to Zaid, and I literally watched him mouth these words saying, "Go take the penalty. You don't want that smoke." And Zaid did exactly that. He went in the penalty box.
Yeah, you don't want to fight Cale Kessie unless you have a death wish, I don't think, honestly.
So I asked Zaid about it a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, "Not in the moment." He's like, "I wanted to fight him, but I wasn't gonna fight him." I'm like, "Trust me, you don't want that guy is an animal."
I've seen it plenty of times myself, honestly. And, like you said, though, in the moment, that's all you can think of is you're like, yeah, I can take this guy. And, nobody does a tail of the tape in their head. They just see a guy and they want to go after him. You give Zaid a lot of credit. I mean, he's a fiery guy, and if he gets under Cale Kessie's skin, I mean, he's playing his role well, honestly, if Cale Kessie's targeting him. So definitely miss having him in Hershey, that's for sure.
And so obviously the winner of this series will move on to play Hershey and Charlotte. And maybe one or both of you guys can answer this one again, but how difficult of a series can Charlotte make this on Hershey coming up here?
Well, to me, I really think with Charlotte, their objective has to be to take both of their games at Bojangles to start the series. But, Charlotte historically has been such a hard opponent for Hershey. Basically, since they became the Checkers from the Albany River Rats, right? It was right after the Bears went back-to-back in the Calder Cups, and the Checkers bounced the Bears, right? Like, they sort of had this aura about them that the Bears just haven't been able to figure out ever since then, essentially. Obviously they were a little bit more distant before, and now they're a little closer. But, Bojangles has always been a tough place for the Bears to play, and obviously we're only 4 years removed from the Checkers bounce. Obviously, it was a different affiliation, a completely different time, but bouncing the Bears from the playoffs. And a lot of those memories linger in a lot of ways. So, the Bears, I think, have had a, fairly average record against the Checkers. The Checkers had the majority of the wins in the series. But, obviously the Bears are now fully powered from Washington in a lot of ways too. I just think the Checkers just need to, bring that hard workman-like attitude they had against Lehigh Valley and, just hope it translates in a lot of ways. Hopefully for them that they can get a couple of goals. The Bears are not great at coming back from deficits is one thing I noticed about them this year, but I think the Checkers just need to bring that hard workman-like attitude that's stymied the Bears at times this season. And that's how they hang into it. Now, obviously, I'm going to take the other side of the coin here. Hershey is full powered and then some. I think everybody's healthy. They have Alexei Protas, Joe Snively, and Beck Mallenstein back. That's a whole, 3 players that are inserted into the lineup. There's a lot of great players sitting on the sidelines for the Bears. Shane Gersich, Henrik Borgstrom, Matt Strome are just among those guys. I'm very excited to see.
You took Matt Strome and Logan Day from us. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. And Matt Strome, unfortunately, made you guys remember that a couple, back in March, I think that was with that one big goal. His first goal of the season, too, which was cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. We appreciate that.
And defensively, Logan Day's been fantastic, a fantastic addition. I would, he's typically been the 7th or 8th defenseman on the outside with Jake Massey. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a sweater, though. He has had great chemistry with Aaron Ness. He's despite the fact he doesn't have a goal this season, he's been a very solid defenseman. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he pushes somebody out of the lineup at least to start the series. I'm sorry, Zach, I totally veered off from your question, but anytime I get a chance to talk about the Bears, I just gush. So I'm all here for it.
Somebody's got a team crush.
Beat, man, what do you expect? So I'm going to throw this out to everyone out there, Who is going to meet in the Atlantic Division Finals here in the playoffs? I'm putting you on the spot.
Providence Hershey?
Oh, God, that's so vanilla.
I was going to say the same thing.
Providence and Hartford? I don't know.
That's a little... Well, it can't be Providence and Hartford, Sam.
All right, fine. Providence and Charlotte. Are you happy now?
Well, Corey's not. But, Corey, who you got?
I'm not happy. You're right. But no, I would say it's... I have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be Hershey Hartford for some reason, just for maximum chaos. But, it's destined for Hershey to have a tough road through the Atlantic. And I'll tell you why. Because these 3 teams, not only are they playing Charlotte, who I was just telling you guys about bounced the Bears in 2019, but both Providence and Hartford had their fingerprints on bouncing Hershey in years before that. Providence bounced Hershey in 2017. Hartford bounced them in their last playoff appearance in 2015. The road through the Atlantic Division for the Bears is paved with, as John Walton so famously said during his call of Evgeny Kuznetsov's goal over Pittsburgh in Game 6 of 2018, exercising some demons. The Bears have to exercise some demons in order to make it through the Atlantic, just, no matter what happens. So I'm expecting it to be maximum chaos. I feel like we're almost destined to see Hershey and Providence just so the Bears can reap the, negative rewards of missing out on finishing first. So I'll say Hershey Hartford just so that doesn't happen. But, I feel like it's destiny to have to deal with one of these things for sure.
Zach, who do you got?
I'll go Providence and bingo. I think both of those teams will make it deep. I don't know. See, I can't
shout out. I like it.
I can't see anybody else besides Providence and Hershey here, right? Like, I like Charlotte. I really do. And it was great watching them bounce the Marlies earlier on in the year. And I think that they got the chops, but Hershey's just so good. And Providence is good too, right? So I'm playing vanilla guy here.
Yeah, I gave Sam grief for it, but I'm going to take Providence and Hershey in this one. I think the firepower is just too much. Hartford, I love a good underdog story. I'd love to see the Wolfpack kind of make a run and throw a wrench in everyone's plans, but when you throw in all the firepower that the Bruins have, I don't even think they're going to miss Brandon Bussey even a little bit. I think they're going to kind of roll over here. They've been getting healthy. They've been getting rest. They're going to be fresh for this, and I think it's going to be maybe not as close as people want to see. And then Hershey, again, you've kind of touched on it all year, Corey, about how good this Bears team has been consistently top to bottom. Yeah, exactly. You deserve to wipe those hands there clean because you did a lot of dirty work there this year. And if Charlotte's got Alex Lyon in that, maybe it's a different story, but I just don't see. Yeah, I know that one was for you, Sam. But it's also for me because I enjoyed watching Lion's success up there in Florida, and I hope he continues to have more. But I don't think he's going to have a chance to shine here for Charlotte. And if he does, it might be too little too late once he gets down there with the Checkers. So give me Chocolate Town in there. I think they're going to run it. Well,
we were making predictions on the Buttes real early in the season, Dan and I, and I have predicted that Hershey and Coachella meet in the finals.
That'd be good. That'd be really good.
Yeah,
I think I just stressed Zach out really hard.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. You have a couple Calgary fanboys on this pod, so it'd be a different story. It'd be a different story if Potts was there, but
you know what? I do have to say that if Calgary gets in, Dustin Wolf is so deserving of a Calder Cup right now. I am a Dustin Wolf fan, so I can agree with that.
He's approaching godlike status, and we'll talk. I mean, we've already talked enough about him, but I'm sure we'll talk more. Sam, it's been incredible having you on as always. Let the people know where they can find you if they want to chirp you about your takes.
Chirp me. You're the only one who gives me about if I don't put U.S. Olympian in front of Pat Nagel.
Well, he deserves it. He was on the Olympic team, Sam. So.
Oh my God. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at Samantha Wismer. You can also follow my AHL not TV show. My God, podcast.
It's kind of a TV show.
It's kind of a TV show. You have me on it anyway. At AHL Buttes. And that is hosted by Old City Sports Network. And you can also find some of my photography on Old City Sports Network website and some of my writing there, as well as Flyers Nitty Gritty.
And once again, I just want to say thanks for Sam for coming on and being a part of our show. I really appreciate her insight on the team and on the division. She's been working tirelessly ever since I've come into contact with her, and she does a great job covering all levels of Flyers hockey from the NHL down to the coast. So again, we thank Sam for that. But as we move on to the only matchup we had in the North here in round one, I touched on it earlier as we open up here, guys. What happened to Laval? I was expecting a lot of hype from this team kind of coming in on a hot streak, really putting Utica there on upset watch, and the Rockets offense really just kind of blew up on the launch pad. Man, it looks like they had Elon Musk driving that thing. And you look at all the names that were associated with it. They had Raphael Harvey Pinard come back up from an incredible stretch up there in Montreal. You had Anthony Richard has been making plays all year. Jesse Ylonen. Danik Martel came up huge for the Rocket last year in the playoffs. All those guys combined for 1 assist in 2 games. That is not going to get it done.
No, and I really don't think it really was. And to me, it kind of felt like Laval kind of showed its kind of true colors per se, right? Like they showed that this run and the last part of the season wasn't sustainable, right? And it's easy enough to kind of look at the numbers and say, oh, well, they only scored 2 goals, 3 goals in that whole series. But the way I kind of looked at it, and I kind of went back to game 1 where they came out flat-footed. They didn't really have any chances to kind of capitalize on. They didn't have any sort of balances. They didn't have the puck kind of go their way. You can kind of make an argument for the referees not really going on their side, but it wasn't really enough to kind of be the deciding factor in it. But they just never really had those opportunities that Utica had. And I think that Utica kind of had those bounces and they were able to kind of get those chances to score goals. And so when you kind of have that little bit of puck luck and you have things kind of going right, and there was just so much frustration on the Rocket bench. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, they're getting into their own head here by showing this kind of frustration and being so frustrated, right? And you could say something about Primo letting up a couple of softish goals in game one, but I really don't think that he was the deciding factor because Laval's offense just wasn't there. The shots on goal weren't all that great, but they were, kind of good. I actually had a lot more hope for them as they went into game two. And, obviously we kind of know the story right now that it was a 2-1 finish. And Utica really turned on the taps to start off the game, and this is where I was like, okay, well, this is the end, right? And it was all Primo. The first 10 minutes was just nothing but Caden Primo, and I was thinking like this guy is going to be the deciding factor if they win, and I really do think that he was a deciding factor on it being so close, right? I don't think that the blame can kind of be stuck on him, and from the 10-minute mark in the first period onwards, I really do think that they had possession all the way up until like the start of the third period, right? They showed that they had this kind of will to win. They recognized the situation on how bad or potentially bad this could be, right? And the shots didn't really tell the story because in the back 10, Utica kind of dominated things, and Laval kind of got the win in the second period. So kind of it was kind of there. Look, the back 10 minutes was all Utica, and I can't stress this enough, folks. Like they didn't have a snowball's chance, and the kind of reality of it is that Primo just got absolutely dumped on, and I there's actually a picture in the article, so you can go back and check that on the fieldpasshockey.com, where there's 5 players standing in front of Primo. There was no chance for him to see the puck in that 2 seconds left goal, right? So that kind of happened. And then once it got into overtime, well, that was it, right? Utica had things firing on all cylinders. It was probably one of the loudest moments of the arena that I've seen so far this year. And Laval put up a pretty good show. You couldn't hear yourself think in the final 5 minutes. It was like a soccer match, and their 3,000 fans sounded like 20,000. And you know what? It ended with Utica getting 7 shots in overtime in like 2 minutes or something like that, just all swatting at them consistently. And of course they got it. And I want to put a shout out as well to Nico Dawes, who was absolutely Dawsome throughout the series. 58 of 59 saves there. So yeah, it was a good series for him.
Would it be fair to say that, we kind of saw the similar situation with Springfield where they kind of burnt out? Does it really speak to like how tough it is year on year to repeat as champions? Obviously Laval did not make it to the Calder Cup finals, but them and Springfield were the top dogs of the East last year. Does it kind of speak to a trend that we've seen between those two teams where it's just that hard to sustain, that kind of group and that kind of, success year on year?
I think so too. And, you kind of got to look up at the NHL for that, at least in Laval's situation where the team is just simply trying to rebuild. Montreal last year was trying to put in anything into the tank to make it go. Nothing worked, right? This year, you could say something about the team being made of glass. You could say whatever you want, but I feel that they didn't really have any chemistry. Montreal sent down all these guys, which is great on one hand, but these guys, it felt like they just never played with each other before. There was just something about it that they just couldn't get things to click. And game 2 is where they kind of figured that out. And I thought game 2 was going to be where they kind of took that win because they had it figured out. But, I just don't think it just felt so mismatched. Right. And I know it doesn't really answer your question, but if I'm going to answer your question, it's incredibly hard, right? If you're an AHL, NHL team and you don't put money into your AHL, you don't put time, I don't want to say money, but resources and players into your AHL squad, you're not going to do anything. You might make it to the playoffs, and this is kind of the case. They didn't do anything with the squad all year. They got in, and then when it blowed up in their face, they said, "Oh, I don't understand." So that's kind of where I seen it.
Speaking of loading up and giving resources to your AHL team, let's take a look over here at the Central, where their first round series has concluded with the Rockford IceHogs moving on after they defeated the Iowa Wild in 2 straight games, but both games being decided in overtime. And the heroes over there in Rockford, Rinaldi and Buddy Robinson, were both kind of textbook